Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Uh, Welcome to this second meeting in our series on the spiritual path, a theosophical perspective. Last week we had really two inspiring and such interesting presentations on the self-evolving circle of identity and confidence and virtue on the path. Thank you to Jerry and Ava for those presentations last week. Today, we will be hearing from Vikash on the science of self-transformation. And then we will hear from Alex on the Eightfold Noble Path. Just a reminder to watch your sound, your Zoom etiquette, and keep yourself muted when not speaking. We will be going until 11:30 Pacific time, an hour and a half, at which time anyone who needs to can certainly leave the meeting. If we have some momentum and people want to keep going, we'll probably keep the Zoom room open for 15 minutes or so afterwards. And I did want to also remind folks, this series is a joint presentation by universaltheosophy.com and the United Lodge of Theosophists. And looking ahead, next week, April 29th, the themes will be the search for truth and Plato's allegory of the cave. So if you enjoy today and please tune in next week. Also looking a little bit further ahead, May 13th, Saturday at this time, there will be an International White Lotus Day presentation. And you can find information about this on the Universal Theosophy website under the Community tab. And without further ado then, I invite Vikash to his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And namaste and welcome to all. And thank you for joining this talk. So as you all know, as the chair mentioned, the topic for today's talk is the science of self-transformation, and it is part of the lecture series, third in number. So before we start, I would just like to provide a disclaimer that the following slides is based on my study and understanding, and would request you all to take it with a pinch of salt. So we will start with the shloka from Dhammapada, which provides us the right mental furniture and approach to understand the same, so that we can prepare our minds in the right direction. All that we are is the result of what we have thought, and all that we are is founded on our thoughts and formed of our thoughts. So if this is really the case, then it implies that if we think, speak, and act like a Buddha, we might become a Buddha. Is that so easy? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. But what's stopping us to become a Buddha? If this really is the truth. So let's try to understand the thought process. What happens when a thought originates, and what are thoughts? Now, if we really look deep down, we'll see that there is a series of actions or series of steps or things happening. Thoughts arise in our mind. They may have associated feelings, or feelings may arise which may result in thoughts. And thoughts and or feelings may result in desire or desires which propel will, because behind will there is desire. And that will further propel action. Or that will may further propel thoughts, or thoughts may again lead to further thoughts. So we have a kind of a series of chain of thoughts also possible. where thought 1 triggers thought 2, which triggers thought 3, and which also triggers a series of feelings and series of actions. But if we really try to understand this pattern and see what's happening, we will understand that it's like the web of cause and effect. So there is an initial cause, which we call cause 1, which results in an effect 1. But in turn, that effect 1 becomes a cause 2 and leads to effect 2. And that effect 2 becomes cause 3, and in turn, it results in effect 3, and so on and so forth. So ideally, it's causal chain, wherein cause 1 results in effect n. And that's what is happening with our thoughts. We are creating a web around us in our mind. But we should also keep in mind that every thought has a lifespan. There is a birth of the thought, and with thoughts, there are associated elementals, and there is a lifespan of the thought. And after some time, when the energy dissipates, the thought dies, or the thought no longer exists with the same potential. But the question is that, can we really observe all this? And apart from this, can we really observe the arising of thought in our mind, or the existence of a thought in our mind, or fading away or death of a thought? Or can we even observe the gap between two thoughts, or the moment even before a particular thought has arisen or arrived? But this observation of the thought process in our mind is possible. And this is only possible if we live consciously. So we will discuss further about the practical applications and how is this process working and how can this be achieved, because there is a huge impact. And if we are able to understand this, we can make our lives better. So as we discussed, that every thought is associated with elementals. It's like a center of energy, and a group of thought and elementals together coalesced can be labeled as skandhas. Now, we can also think of thoughts as thought energy, which is giving energy to the elementals, which are centers of energy, or energy which are acted on by us while thinking and in other bodily motions. We also act on them and give them form by a species of thought which we have no register of. And this process keeps on going unconsciously also most of the time. These skandhas are also known as heaps, aggregates, and they are 5 in number exoterically. And Mahatma K.H. mentions that these are primarily part of our system or being, wherein the elements are connected, or the skandhas are connected, or the aggregates are connected with karma and reincarnation, wherein he says, as per the quote, the old being is the sole parent, father and mother at once, of the new being. It is the former who is the creator and fashioner of the latter in reality, and far more so in plain truth than any father in flesh. And once that you have well mastered the meaning of skandhas, you will see what I mean. It is the group of skandhas that form and constitute the physical and mental individuality we call man or any being. This group consists in exoteric teaching of 5 skandhas, namely Rupa, the material properties or attributes. And in fact, Dalai Lama also mentions somewhere that the Rupa skandha in us on the physical plane is nothing but the DNA and RNA in us. Then we have Vedana, sensations, Sana, abstract ideas, Sankara, tendencies, both physical and mental, and Vinana, that is the mental powers and amplification of the 4th, Sankara, meaning mental, physical, and moral predispositions. But then he further adds that there are 2 more which will be known later. But the idea is, if you see, all these aggregates are the fundamental building blocks of all our vehicles or sheets. So everything in the manifested universe, if you see, is basically based on these skandhas, these heaps, these aggregates. So for example, if you have a laptop in front of you, and if you were to unassemble it and take out all the parts and keep it on the table, then the laptop is no longer there. But if you assemble that in the right manner as per the manual and you remake the laptop or reassemble the laptop, then you can label these aggregates as the laptop. Similarly, the human body is composed of various specialized organs. It's an aggregate of organs. Each organ is an aggregate of cells, and so on and so forth. Our solar system is an aggregate of planets and the sun, and each planet is an aggregate of further subdivisions and so on and so forth. Hence, under this basis, everything is temporary and conditioned existence, which implies that there is no intrinsic reality. There is only an absolute reality, Paramartha Satya, and rest all is relative reality, Samriti Satya. And absolute reality in this context becomes the substratum or is the basis and substratum of all cyclical conditioned existence. And this forms the basis of the doctrine of shunyata or emptiness. Now, we also know that our thoughts have a direct impact on the astral light. In fact, the whole humanity's thoughts have direct impact on the astral light and the elemental lives. So, HPB mentions that there is the following quote: as the elemental world is automatic and like a photographic plate, all atoms continually arrive at and departing from the human system are constantly assuming the impression conveyed by the acts and the thoughts of that person. And therefore, if he sets up a strong current of thought, he attracts elementals in greater number. And they all take on one prevailing tendency or color, so that all new arrivals find a homogeneous color or image which they instantly assume. On the other hand, if a man who has many diversities of thought and meditation is not homogeneous, but so to say multicolored, and so the elementals may lodge in that part which is different from the rest and go away in the like condition. But we human beings are eternal thinkers. What can we do about it? We are constantly thinking. Thought process is always happening. And these thoughts originate on 7 subdivisions or planes of our mind, manas. And likewise, we have associated elementals on each plane. So, we all know, as per the voice of silence, that mind is the slayer of the real. And the student is asked to slay the slayer. But how do we practically do that? The other aspect is that every thought generated impacts the evolution of or involution of the lower kingdoms, and hence it is directly connected to our thought, speech, and action. So consciously or unconsciously, we are continuously working on coloring or giving impact to the lower kingdoms also. Now, we have been given an interesting abstract formula. We can apply this to the thought process also. The formula provided in sacred doctrine is: the center is everywhere and nowhere, the circumference is everywhere and nowhere, in one way. So, using this abstract formula, we can arrive at a formula wherein we can think of wherever there is a center, there is an associated circumference. And wherever there is a circumference, there is an associated center. How do we apply this to our context? So every single thought we think and action we perform has a definite and potent effect in gradually shaping and altering the nature of our skandhas and this transformation, which may be for good or bad, depending on the nature of our thoughts and actions, and will have an inescapable effect on us in the subsequent lifetime, if not in the current one. And Mahatma Cage mentions in this context that skandhas represent not only a material, but also a set of mental and moral qualities. And that even as we live this present life, they are ever and ceaselessly at work in preparing the abstract mold, the privation of the future new being. So our thoughts here, with respect to our formula, becomes the center, and the privation or the mold becomes the circumference. Next formula, what we can think about is that each center is a circumference for a smaller center, and each circumference is a center for a larger circumference. Hence, they are interconnected. So the circle and the circumference and the center, they all become a fractal image of each other. So what's happening is, let's say there is a circle and a center, and you focus using a microscope or a similar instrument on the center dot, it will blow up and it will look big, wherein it will look like a circle itself and a circumference itself, and it will hypothetically or mathematically have a center. And you keep on drilling down, zooming in, each center will become a circumference, and you keep on zooming out, even a circle from afar will look like a dot or a center. So that's the idea. And each center is associated with a frequency, and the influence of that frequency is the circumference. So how do we apply this to our context? Now, astral light, which is surrounding our earth and all around us, we have lower astral light and higher also. So astral light is continuously being colored by our thoughts. And based on our thoughts, there is continuous ebb and flow of magnetic and electromagnetic radiations known as magnetic respiration, which surrounds us in the astral light, where our reflections are kept. These reflections continuously influence our thoughts, and it is thus that we become and we remain the child of our own works of progeny. Hence, the importance of right thought, speech, and action. Next, let's see the other aspect. Center aligns when frequency is aligned. So what does this mean in the real context? When we align our thoughts to the highest possible thoughts you can think of and try to fix your attention on the same with an iron spiritual will, by continuously bringing it back to that center, that's when you align your center to that thoughts center on which your mind is fixed. So if you're trying to align your thoughts to the highest which your mind can comprehend, then your center, that is your heart, would be aligned to that center, which is the highest thought which you are able to comprehend. Hence, in order to achieve that, in order to tune your frequency to the highest possible thought or frequency, we need to become the man of meditation. That is 24/7, consciously aligning our frequency and thought to the highest possible. Next formula from this abstract which arises is that all centers and circumferences are contained in the absolute abstract container space, which itself has its frequency, that, and center, the central spiritual sun. Similarly, using the same concept, we can have our own center as the heart. The universe has its center as the sun. the cosmos has the center as the central spiritual sun. Similarly, with analogy and correspondence, each cell of our body has its center and its privation, that is the boundary of the cell or the circumference. And each organ has its own center. So the real harmony is attained in aligning our frequency or our center by degrees to the frequency of that and aligning our heart center with that. But how is all this possible? This is only possible if we are living a conscious life. But what is conscious life? And what are the practical aspects of it? Now, thoughts are very swift. How do we practically control our mind and thoughts? We don't even know when the thought arises, and we don't even know by the time we realize it's too late. What is the mechanism? How it works? So if you see here, we have 5 senses. Each sense is interacting with the outside world on the left. The point of contact where it interacts with the outside world is known as sparsha or point of contact. And it captures the information like sensors or actuators from the external environment and passes on electrical signals to the brain. In fact, it is the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, skin consciousness, so on and so forth, which passes electrical signals to the brain consciousness. The junction where this information moves from one level of consciousness to the other level of consciousness, that is known as the point of contact, this vertical line which you are seeing. From there, it seems, and we are not sure, it's either the astral currents or fohad, which passes the information from brain consciousness to the mind consciousness. And mind, as you know, is on the mental plane. It is also known as the Raja of the senses, the king of the senses. It is in fact the 6th sense. And mind consciousness is provided a single thought to ascertain. So let's say you're driving a car, you are talking with somebody in the car, and you are also sipping juice or eating your sandwich, and you are hearing the sounds of music. So there are multiple signals which are coming to you, but all of those are presented to the mind consciousness as single thought. Now, these thoughts which are originating in your mind because of external impulses or information presented to the mind may also trigger a chain of thoughts and associated elementals, as we have seen in the initial slides. And at each point of contact, because each consciousness, eye, ear, nose, brain, mind, so on and so forth, is made up of skandhas. So the skandhas at each transition point color that information which is coming, and that causes the bias or predispositions. So let's keep this diagram at the back of our mind. Finally, the 7th sense is buddhi, which ascertains what exactly is happening. Now, thought creation is like generating waves by throwing a stone in the pond. So on the water surface, we see waves, but wherever you throw the stone, wherever it hits the water, that's where the ripples start from and go to the circumference of the pond or the limits of the pond. And from there, it comes back cyclically to that center again, and then it goes back. We may think after 5 minutes it has faded, but it never fades. That's how thoughts are. The moment it arises, it causes those ripples sending out in the etheric space or in the astral field, if you may call it. And those ripples are always going and coming back from that center. So this takes us back to the idea of that circle and center concept. And Apart from this, very interesting thing is that our human body works at 2.1 volts as per the scientist, and its frequency is dynamically changing based on our thoughts, thus impacting our body, organ, environment around us. Now, since we are all connected, even science agrees to that, we contribute and are responsible for the state of the whole system, whether we call it our solar system or universe or cosmos or our country or nation or home or vicinity or whatever. So that's an important point. We should keep it at the back of our mind. Hence, we need to be very vigilant, mindful, aware, and thus observe our thoughts, our emotions, and do not impulsively react to the same. So this is a practical approach. While observing, we are taking the stand of the witness consciousness. And just by observing and doing this, in this manner, what happens? The energy weakens and dissipates. So the moment you get irritation and you are aware of that irritation, you do not react immediately. So that skandhaic tendencies or energies you are dissipating, you are creating a new chain of cause and effect. You are creating a new cycle. And every time that irritation comes, you observe. That's all you do. And have an equal and opposite thought. So you are not giving more food and energy to that previous tendencies and skandhas and elementals. However, based on laws of cycle, the similar thoughts will come again and again. With constant vigil, we can, during every cycle, diminish the energy of the disharmonious thought by not feeding it more, and at the same time, consciously arising equal and opposite thoughts which are harmonious. And this is one of the practical mechanisms in which we can break our old habit patterns, old thought habit patterns, or even physical habit patterns and generate new ones. Now, when we are perceiving the world with our senses, we are actually coloring it with our preconceived ideas and existing skandhas. So just imagine if you are not doing this, if you are not coloring this. So this happens at two levels. One is conscious and other is unconscious. Because of our predispositions from our previous births, we are automatically, unconsciously coloring the perceptions. Just imagine if we were to not color it, then we were to see the real nature of the world and people and situation around us. The whole experience of life will change. Hence, we need to take the position of the divine witness, unattached, unaffected, and just observe. Thus, observing our thoughts, as we discussed, reduces the energy or momentum of the thought, feelings, and then with the right discrimination, we can act upon the same as appropriate without having any attachment. So these are the practical aspects which we can apply. Now, the transgression actually happens only at the mind door. So as we saw in the previous slide, brain consciousness interacts with the mind consciousness. On the center of the screen between brain consciousness and mind consciousness, we have point of contact. The moment one thought is presented to the mind's eye, if we are aware of that thought, we are living consciously, then we are able to not react, but we are able to observe, and being mindful with knowledge and wisdom, we are able to take the right action. So that's the whole idea. But if we are not able to do that, then what happens is there are mental defilements and unwholesome activities happen. That is why it's very important to consciously work on purification of the mind. And we need to consciously focus on the wholesome thoughts. Now, this is a very interesting example which is always provided. The vrittis or modification of the mind, because mind is the real plane of action. So what happens is, let's say there is sun and there is a water body, a river or a pond or a lake, whatever. On the surface, there are a lot of waves, like the modifications of the mind, the vrittis. And sun's rays are falling on the surface because there are, let's say, numerous infinite waves coming and going. We can see thousands and millions of suns reflected, but there is only one sun. Similarly, the thoughts are coming and going, and the reflection is happening. But if you go deep down the water body at the bottom end of the lake, you will find that the fluctuations of the waves are almost negligible or not there. So what's happening is that we are able to see that the substratum of the mind is actually calm, but on the surface, all these fluctuations are happening. If we are able to observe our thoughts and take the stand of the divine witness and use wisdom and knowledge to work appropriately or address appropriately those thoughts, then these vrittis or modifications will lessen, and we will reach a point where we have a calm mind. Also, we need to note that if we are aware and fix our attention, then we can see that the transference of sensation from any organ is instantaneous. So there is another thing happening sort of unconsciously, that our organs and senses are also instantaneously sending information, and we need to be aware of what's happening on a very minute level. Only then we will be able to observe and take the right action, which is very difficult, but practically it helps, and with practice it evolves. So what's happening is that there are 7 scales of consciousness. The first one is sense perception, and most of the humanity works on the first one, sense perception. But based on what level of consciousness we are working on, or which is activated or prominent, we also have the 7 aspects of levels of mind consciousness. So the information, as we discussed, which is coming, is actually interpreted or perceived by one of the 7 levels of mind consciousness. So if we are only working on sense perception and on the lowest level of mind consciousness, then we will only be able to touch the skin or the surface of the matter or the context. But if we are working, let's say, on the 7th spiritual conscious perception and the 7th aspect of mind consciousness, then we will be able to perceive on the level of perhaps absolute truth and not relative truth. And this is in our hands. By practice, we have to work on it. Hence, we need to try to at least attempt in being consciously aware of every thought and try to use the higher aspects of our mind for perceiving the same while operating at a higher consciousness level, consciously. Hence, conscious living. At the same time, we need to self-introspect and inspect our motives and our intentions at every step, thus killing the personality. Our thought, speech, and action should be based on the wants, should not be based on the wants of our personality. Because most of the time, it's the karmic aspect or the karma manasik aspect which is driving us. And the false identification of our real nature with this physical body. And which becomes the root cause of ignorance, delusion, and cause of separateness. Now, there's another concept of mind stream where moment to moment continuum is maintained, which is happening during life and continuing to the next life, even at intermediate stages like Devachan. So this can be related to cause and effect, as we discussed. So what does this mean? Let's see the next slide. In this context, WQJ says The mind is the actor, the person who is attached. When it is deluded, it is not able to throw off the subtle chains that bind it to reincarnation. Having spent an incarnation in looking after results, it is full of earthly impressions and has made the outer skandhas very powerful. So when it stays in Devachan, is at its end, the old images, impressions, and the powerful skandhas drag it back to another life. At the time of bodily death, the mind is temporarily almost altered into the image of the dominant thought of life, and so is beside itself or insane by comparison with a sage and with what ought to be its proper state. Being so, it is impossible for it either to prevent rebirth or to select and take up an incarnation with a definite end and work in the world in view. So it is the dominant thought which plays an important role. So we need to self-introspect and find out what is the focus and main theme of our life. What does this mean? Let's say there is a businessman who always is trying to make money in 100 different ways throughout his life. So the dominant thought in this person's life is making money. Similarly, a painter, his dominant thought is painting. A musician, dominant thought is music, so on and so forth. So we need to understand, each one of us, what is the dominant theme in our life, and we need to course correct that if required. WQJ says, the man whose devotion has been broken off by death goeth to the regions of the righteous and is then born again on earth. Being thus born again, he comes in contact with the knowledge which has belonged to him in his former body. And from that time, he struggles more diligently towards perfection. For even unwittingly, by reason of that past practice, he is led and works on. So this becomes the mind stream continuum. And finally, this leads us to that we need to work 24/7 on this. But how to practice? We have ample opportunity throughout our life. When we are walking, we can do walking meditation. We can be conscious about each step we are taking. We can walk in a proper manner. We can be aware of our thoughts. While eating, we can have eating meditation, where we are eating moderately, we are aware of the taste, we are respecting food, we are offering food to the higher self, we are not attached to the food, we realize that this food is not for taste or sense pleasure. This food is an offering to the body, the instrument which we have been provided, so that we are able to take care of this instrument. Similarly, working, sleeping meditation. Even before sleep, we can review our entire day and consciously get into sleep with higher thoughts. Similarly, seeing meditation. And when we get up in the morning, we can preview the upcoming day in the right context, and similarly review the day at the end of the day. And this is exactly what happens when we leave our body. We review our entire life, and when we are about to be born and come out from the doors of Devachan, we sort of preview. So this is exactly the pattern which is also happening on the other end. And finally, we should consider our life as dreamlike, but yet perform each and every duty with the right attitude without expectation of any results, while having the stand of the divine witness and having the whole attention on the higher self. Only then we will be able to be on the right track. But why we are saying dreamlike? Because then we do not have attachment with our body. If this body itself doesn't belong to us, then how our wife, children, family, friends, belongings belong to us? And the example of practical application is that when the eye door or eye consciousness, let's say, sees an attractive and beautiful thing, person, or object, what happens? Then the visible form stimulates the eye door. A sequence of mind movements occur in split microseconds as follows. One attends to the object. 2, eye consciousness sees the object, receives the object. 3, mind consciousness investigates the object, determines the object, and fully perceives the object or moves towards it. 4, restraint may arise at the moment of full perception by means of morality, shila, mindfulness, sati, knowledge, jnana, forbearance, khanti, or effort, virya. One may dwell on the emptiness of the object as discussed. However, if any one of these forms of restraint arises, the morality of restraining the senses is fulfilled. Or alternatively, sense self-indulgence may arise due to immorality, mindlessness, ignorance, impatience, or idleness. So this is one of the real life practical scenarios or examples how it's happening. Hence, meditating in this manner, we are 24/7 working on purification of the 49 fires, that is our 49 sheaths, by perfecting the paramitas. That's why the paramitas are important. So we will not get into these paramitas. These were discussed in the previous talk. But the idea is that we start with Vairagya, and Vairagya itself has all the other 6 in it. So every paramita has the other paramitas in it. So while we are developing Vairagya, we also need to develop Dana, Prajna, Shila, Dhyana, Kshanti, and Virya. So all go hand in hand. And hence we need to understand the fundamental unity of all and how we can either work with nature and the whole or against based on our thoughts, speech, and action. Finally, a closing thought from Mahatma K.H. A higher faculty belonging to the higher life must see, and it is truly impossible to force it upon one's understanding, merely in words. One must see with his spiritual eye, hear with his dharmakayak ear, feel with the sensations of his ashta vijnana, spiritual eye, before he can comprehend this doctrine fully. Otherwise, it may but increase one's discomfort and add to his knowledge very little. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vikash. Thanks for preparing all of this. Wonderfully comprehensive, and it really struck me that you gave acute, practical, psychological instruction, but then gave us a very clear metaphysical background for understanding it, a very clear conceptual background. So I look forward to the questions that we'll bring up. And now we're going to turn to Alex, who I think is going to queue up his slides here.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you for participating, and thank you, Vikash, for the great presentation. Due to time restraints, what should I do, 15 minutes? So we have time for question and answer?
Oh, it's Alex, if you need to, take what you need to. I think if you go to 10 after or 15 after, it's fine. We really want to put the emphasis on the lectures. Okay. And people who want to stay and talk more can stay afterwards. So let's hear what you've prepared.
Okay. So the previous one was a great segue to the Eightfold Noble Path. I'm sure that everybody here is familiar with it. probably everybody knows that at the night of his enlightenment, the Buddha, there were three moments, which were very important. In the first moment of his enlightenment, he was able to see, many, many past lives that he had. In the second moment, he was able to see the past lives of all sentient beings, all the different sentient beings from all the different 6 realms. And then at the end, the third watch of the night, that's when the teachings came, and that we know as the Four Noble Truths and the 12 Nidanas, which were mentioned a little bit at the beginning in the previous presentation. The Four Noble Truths, everybody is familiar with them. The first one is there is suffering. The second is the cause of suffering. The third one is very radical, is cessation of suffering, nirodha. And the fourth one is the path. So it's called the Arya path, the path of the nobles, because of their heart, their intentions, their wisdom, are completely, purified, and that nobility of heart manifest in body, speech, and mind. And it's divided, as we see here, the Eightfold Noble Path. And here you have it color-coded. Of course, I cannot take credit for this slide. It was made by our good friend Victoria Gavoyan. So she takes the whole credit for the art. So they're color-coded, and we can start. They're put together as they appear in a Longchenpa book. But I will start because they present the 3 aspects of the path, the 3 columns, Shila, Prajna, actually Shila, Dhyana, and Prajna. So these are the 3 columns of the path on which you can actually lay out the paramitas. The paramitas and the Eightfold Noble Path are really go together. So we will start with Shila first, the division of ethical conduct, which in the paramitas are the first 4. If you take the 6 paramitas, the traditional presentation of the 6 paramitas. So here we have right speech and right conduct, action. And then you have right livelihood. So these are 3 aspects of our life that are actually very much connected with what was said earlier. Right speech, right conduct, and right livelihood. So these are the basis for what we call Shila. Shila is the umbrella term under which you have ethical conduct. So you start with this idea of conduct. What is in daily life, how we deal with others, how we talk to other people, how we conduct ourselves, etc., etc. Now, the conduct, Shila, allows us to, in a sense, diminish what is called suffering of suffering, what was called suffering of suffering. I forgot to turn on the camera. Suffering of suffering is the most basic suffering, and it's usually the cause of suffering is due to poor ethical behavior. Suffering of suffering is connected with physical suffering, physical illnesses, many things like that. And the Buddha was called the great doctor, right? Because he was helping humans to heal from within, both body, speech, and mind. So suffering of suffering is caused mostly by unethical behavior. So what's the antidote? The antidote is ethical behavior, which is synthesized by speech, action, and the way that we live, what kind of job we have, etc., etc. That's the Shila aspect of the path. The path that has to do with dhyana, with the paramita dhyana, is the one on the right side, which is right effort, which we saw it earlier in virya, right mindfulness, and then right concentration and meditation. Those are the three connected with dhyana, meditation. And the right mindfulness, for instance, earlier on in the previous presentation, there was a lot of talk about mindfulness and living a mindful life and how to be aware of thoughts even before they arise. Okay, so what is the practice for that? And the ancient yogis had developed, there's a whole knowledge about this, and they're called the lucid. You have temporal vividness and subtle vividness. So that's the key word, vividness. Through mindfulness and introspection, the vividness of the intrinsic nature of our awareness, that luminosity, arises spontaneously. And through training, we train our mind. So you have subtle vividness. What does subtle vividness do? Subtle vividness picks up very subtle thoughts, moments of thoughts, which are subconscious to us. We don't know anything about them. That's why they're called subconscious, but because they're very subtle. But the vividness that now we developed throws a profound light in the aspect of our nature that are unknown. So to this very subtle vividness, we pick up thoughts that are completely, can say, they pass completely unnoticed. The other kind of vividness, what is called temporal vividness. Temporal vividness allows us to pick up thoughts, emotions, feelings, inner impulses, which are very, very quick. They are beyond our capacity, our normal capacity, untrained capacity, our untrained mental capacity to pick them up. So through mindfulness and introspection, you bring to bear these two kinds of vividness. And then you can finally experience in your daily life these moments in which you're going to be aware of a thought before it has arisen. And that's an incredible moment because you can intervene immediately. And that thanks to these two kinds of vividness, which of course brings us to the idea of the right concentration and meditation. So during the day, if you can sustain that, because for us, the idea is sustainability, because all of us have moments of clarity, have moments of great compassion, of great insight, and great intuitions. But without being able to sustain them, in time, they just become a memory, a beautiful memory, something that we remember, but they're not part of our DNA in daily life. So the sustainability, sustaining mindfulness is done through the process, what they call the pyramid of meditation. If you all remember, there was a time in which we're talking about the pyramids of the foods that we were eating. And, you had to eat certain foods, and then you had this pyramid. Now you have the same thing in meditation. The pyramid of meditation, the basis is relaxation. But when we talk about relaxation, it's not just the superficial relaxation. Oh, I'm so relaxed. We're not talking becoming a wet noodle. We're talking this dynamic equilibrium. There is a dynamic equilibrium that occurs in relaxation. So the body, for instance, the relaxation of the body assumes a position of alert, erect, especially the spine, because the spine is key. when you're meditating, but you're relaxed. So you are relaxing, but at the same time, you are alert. You have this vividness because you want to sustain the vividness that we were just talking about. So the basis of the pyramid is relaxation. In the middle of the pyramid, you have stability, the stability of the mind. So what gives stability? The stability is given by the Shila, the ethical conduct, and the right mindfulness and introspection. That meditation, that dhyana gives the stability. The pinnacle of the pyramid is prajna, is luminosity, is wisdom. But the pinnacle of every pyramid is top heavy. So it can topple over very easily if it doesn't have a strong basis like relaxation and stability. So in the Eightfold Noble Path, you have this pyramid. You have the pyramid that we were talking about. The relaxation is brought about by Shila, the right speech, right conduct, and right livelihood. So you see, it's not a relaxation that, oh, I'm so relaxed. It's a relaxation that arises from ethics. It's a relaxation that arises from the first paramitas. Then the stability is offered by dhyana, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. That's the stability. And now we go to the pinnacle of the pyramid of meditation, which is the division of wisdom, which is prajna in the Eightfold Noble Path. Right understanding, view, insight, and right thought and intention. All those were touched upon earlier in the previous talk. So that's the pinnacle of our pyramid, is the luminosity of prajna. And with the luminosity of prajna, we eliminate the most subtle aspect of suffering. You know, nirodha, the third noble truth, cessation of suffering. So we mentioned earlier that the most basic level of suffering is taken care by ethical behavior. The second level of suffering, which is the suffering of change, is taken care by the aspect of dhyana, samadhi. Samadhi goes deeper than, of course, ethical conduct and is able to cut the root of suffering of change. That means it just through that stability of the mind, we start to understand the profound impermanence of everything in life. So everything is subject to change. And many times we suffer tremendously. What makes us vulnerable to suffering is the fact that we think that that's what is always changing. We take it as permanent. So we take the impermanent for permanent, and we suffer. And in prajna, when you reach prajna, then the highest level of suffering, existential suffering, is removed, because prajna is the aspect of wisdom that unveils what is called in Tibetan yeshe, and in Sanskrit is jnana, unveils the gnosis, unveils primordial wisdom. The wisdom that was always there, but was veiled by all the skandhas, the karmic winds, it's finally revealed through prajna. And when that is revealed, then the last vestige of suffering, the most subtle level of suffering, is removed. So in a sense, we could say, for instance, in this case, you know, what is the difference from yeshe or jnana, primordial wisdom, and prajna? incisive wisdom. Prajna is cultivated. It's something that we can cultivate it through practice. It's something that through the process of the path, we cultivate prajna, and prajna becomes sharper and sharper and sharper. Yeshe is connate, is innate, is born with us. We're born with it. So prajna is cultivated, and yeshe or jnana is unveiled. So that's the big difference between the two. Although prajna is an incredible useful tool, because it's the tool by which we unveil yeshe, we unveil primordial consciousness, which is already our ground. That's who we are, primordial consciousness, but is covered by many veils. And that through the process of the Eightfold Noble Path, the process of the paramitas by themselves are a full path to realization. And the same thing, the Eightfold Noble Path, as far as the practice that is brought up. So finally, just a final thought on this. What do we uncover? We uncover many things by the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path. So by uncovering Shila, that through the right speech, right conduct, and right livelihood, we know how to work with circumstances. It gives you the tool to work with circumstances as they arise, so that we're not swept away by whatever arises in the life. So that's an incredible tool to be able to be pliable and supple. The mind becomes supple, so you can work with circumstances wherever they arise. The second aspect, the dhyana aspect, the stability aspect, is the aspect, of course, of mindfulness and awareness. So now you're able to work with circumstances, but also you bring that quality of stability and awareness and mindfulness in all that you do. And the third one is instant presence. Instant presence. That's the top of the pyramid. Right understanding, insight, right thought, intention. Prajna unveils, as we said earlier, yeshe, so you have an instant presence of your own nature. So now in everything that you do, you bring the capacity of working with circumstances, so that incredible malleability. You're not rigid, you're not controlling, you're just able to work with the circumstances. But not only that, you bring then that stability of the mindfulness. So you're working with circumstances and you bring a quality of mind that is stable, but at the same time, very alert. And then you bring the third one. The third one is exactly instant presence. You're totally present. You're not disconnected with the world. You're not dissociating from the world, but you're totally present. But now you're present with a quality of mind that is highly, highly refined and highly effective. So that's, briefly, I don't want to go too long because we have people that probably have comments and questions. We want everybody to participate. This is briefly an idea of this Eightfold Noble Path, the benefits that it brings through its practice. And one of the greatest benefit is the dissolution of the 3 levels of suffering. I am done.
Thank you very much, Alex. And to me, it was a very interesting way of looking at of connecting the steps of the Noble Eightfold Path with the virtues. And I wonder if we might start off the discussion. I have a question. You spoke about those 3 levels of suffering, the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and existential suffering, which you said was the subtlest. Could you say something more about existential suffering? Sometimes we think of an existential crisis as a crisis for meaning. And I wonder if you're using the word differently than that. How is it different than you know, the suffering of suffering and suffering from change.
Yeah, it connects also with the, as you said, with meaning, and also has the aspect of just being incarnated. There is a sense of suffering because there's a sense of sometimes of not belonging. There's a sense of feeling separate. There's a sense that, you know, nothing is really satisfying. So there is just by being incarnated, you know, in this capsule of body and nadis and all this, you know, that there is this sense of separation and alienation that we feel. Yeah. So that's why prajna cuts the root of that, because prajna cuts the roots of the idea of self-grasping, bifurcation of self and other. That's the cause, the main cause of our suffering. We read it in the Voice of the Silence that, you know, what is it? The greatest dire
heresy of separateness.
Yes, thank you. Then thank you very much. Yes, yeah, the greatest heresy is the heresy of suffering, of separation.
Yeah.
And prajna is what the doctor orders.
Right.
But prajna is very top heavy, it's very sharp. So you have to be able to handle it with care, hence dhyana, hence the stability, hence the relaxation.
Thank you. I remind folks that you've got your digital hand, and if you raise that, that'll help us sort of organize our discussion here. So Jerry's got his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Alex, what for each one of the elements of the Eightfold Path, the Buddha adds the additional explanation of right this, right that. Why is that? Why is there a wrong mindfulness? Why the concept? What is the concept of right being emphasized by the Buddha?
Yes, good question. This is just one point of view, of course. Do you remember in the Voice of the Silence, she talks at a certain time about the 8 miseries, you know, to eliminate the 8 miseries. That's the 8 miseries are the opposite of the Eightfold Noble Path. By practicing the 8 miseries, we just end up, you know, in a personal hell. So yes, there is a right way of talking, there is a right way of doing livelihood, there is a right way of meditating and a wrong way of meditating. And a lot has to do with, Vikash mentioned in the previous talk about intention. So a lot has to do with our intention. So yes, the Eightfold Noble Path is the antidote against the 8 miseries that you find in the Voice of the Silence. So yes, you have a right way of doing certain things, and then you have the wrong way. And the reason why you notice that, you observe it in your life. If I behave in a way, my conduct is unethical, and then I observe the causes and conditions that are set into motion, then I see exactly what unfolds in front of me due to my unethical behavior. So that's one way to look at
it. Judy?
Yes, thank you for both these talks. They're very wonderful and to the point. It seems that they both have a great deal to do with the Shila virtue in the Voice of the Silence, the key that counterbalances the cause and the effect and leaves no further room for karmic action. So that really the question is, how do we achieve that? Do we achieve that by following the Eightfold Path in an exact way? Do we know how to follow it? I mean, what is right speech? What is right action? What is right effort? Because it seems it would vary with the individual to some extent, and yet there would also be general rules for it. I wonder if you could address that issue of the Shila virtue.
it. Well, the little that I know, it just and I'm going back to what Vikash said. It's observing. So there is a way that we learn through books, right? But then there is a way that you learn through observing your mind, you observe in yourself. So for instance, there was a great yogi who came to the Vedanta temple in Los Angeles a long time ago. And he was a yogi of what they call it, the cis-Himalayan, great practitioner of Patanjali. Anyway, he said, I have no books. I never had books. He says, the three great books of my life are Waking State, Dream State, and Dreamless Sleep. So those are the three books of nature. If we're able really to read, if I were able to read my daily life, I would be able to garner from everything that occurs and my mental states, I would be able to garner what Shila is and what is not. So I observe myself when I don't practice Shila, and I start seeing, okay, those are consequences. I just look at my state of mind. I look how, anxious or uptight or et cetera, because of that. And then you look at your mind when you practice Shila and see the difference. And that's very empirical. The yogis are very empirical. They're not so blah, 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 but they're very empirical, and they tell their students, observe your mind, observe when you do something and see what occurs, and you observe when you do the opposite and see what occurs. So that's what I can share about Shila. I try to observe when I practice Shila, what happens in your whole pranic system, psychic system, mind system, what occurs. And when we don't practice that, what occurs? And all the paramitas, I mean, you can do the whole paramitas, the whole study of the paramitas on that. That's what I can offer.
Can we give Vikash the opportunity to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So actually, all the parameters, like Alex mentioned, form or become the path itself. And they all go hand in hand. And as we saw in the diagram, there is a kind of a balance happening. So the first step, which is given in Voice of Silence, is the first step is to be able to benefit mankind. So, and even in order to comprehend this idea to certain degree, that why is the first step to help mankind, we need to understand the root idea of unity and brotherhood to a certain degree. And the moment we understand that root idea about unity, oneness, there is this paramita of dana generated in us or compassion generated in us to a certain degree. And then we realize that, yes, we need to work for the benefit of humanity. That's when we put in effort, and vairagya comes in terms of realizing the true nature of reality to certain degrees, wherein we realize that everything is dreamlike, everything is temporary, the emptiness, everything doesn't have intrinsic reality, everything is made up of skandhas or aggregates or heaps. And that's when we also work in tandem with the other virtues, Shila and Virya. Especially Virya is the dauntless energy which is providing us the impulse to go ahead. But then Shila is balanced by dhyana, as Mr. B.P. Wadia mentions. So you have Shanti balanced with Virya, Shila balanced with dhyana, and Dana balanced with prajna. But since you have already got that Dana feeling, because that's the first step in one way, and then Vairagya is also, you're working on that, the other 6 aspects of Vairagya also start developing in you. And the main idea which comes to mind is that it is the restoration or conscious realignment with the inherent harmony which is required. And that is only possible if we realize the connectedness, unity of all, and the self-introspection of our thought, motives, and intentions realigns us always. It's a checkpoint which has to happen, because we at our stage have ahamkara and we are still associating ourselves with our personality. Even ahamkara is on all 6 planes. Only beyond the 7th, when you reach the arupa planes, you don't have the I or ahamkara. So we have to be very vigilant. So those are the thoughts which come to the mind.
Thank you, Vikash. Alan Cooley.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful comments. There was one comments that Vikash made that really excites me, and I have a very primitive understanding, and I'd like him to, if he'd be so kind as to comment further. The comment that I just wrote down, I may have written it down incorrectly, talked about consciously harmonizing our thoughts. That's what I wrote down. I just wonder if that seems like an exciting concept, but I'm not sure I understand it. I wish you could, if you could further.
Sure. So what's happening here is that this whole idea is about conscious living. Majority of humanity in today's world is reacting to the impulses which are coming from the external world and the thoughts which are arising in the mind, but they are not consciously, appropriately acting or living, that is right thought, speech, and action. So when we are able to, first step is to be aware, second step is observe. So even before awareness, we need to understand these concepts and to understand to a certain degree, and then be aware, and then observe, and then, like Alex also mentioned, experiment, and then you will come to know which thought, speech, and action is wholesome, which is unwholesome, which is creating harmony, which is creating disharmony. And when we are observing in such a way, then we need to consciously course correct our thought, speech, and action. While we are consciously course correcting, we are having at the back of our mind that center, which is the most highest thought which we are able to comprehend, and we are trying to harmonize it to that. So we are changing our frequency, we are changing our entire set of skandhas, we are purifying in that process, we are recalibrating, resetting, and that is consciously attuning us to the harmony. But when we reach that stage, what happens is we may realize that there is still higher level of harmony, and then we need to put in more effort to purify our skandhas, our sheaths, and realign. And then again, we may realize that there is still higher level of harmony. And this process may keep on going maybe dozens of times, but or even beyond that. But this happens life after life after life after many lives. We never know how many. The 49 fires or all our principles or all our sheets are purified in this process. And that's the main goal of conscious living. And this also leads to the idea of mind stream, wherein once we get into this habit of conscious living, when we sleep, we get into conscious sleeping state. And then we awake from sleep state in a conscious way. When we leave our body at the time of death, we consciously leave our body. And perhaps if we have reached that high level as the great sages and adepts and initiates, we may be able to consciously take birth, next birth, and be aware of the entire cycle from the previous to the devachanic state, if any, to the next birth. So that's conscious living.
Thank you, Vikash.
Okay, so we want to consciously harmonize with our highest thoughts. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
I also think part of the part of the point in both talks was that there is a great deal of unconscious or subconscious thought going on with us that is, in a sense, using us until we can use it. There's that line in The Voice of the Silence about using your thoughts before they use you. And it seems to me, I was remembering Alex's discussion about vividness, subtle vividness and temporal vividness. And I think what he was getting at is the practice of making conscious that which is unconscious so we can get control of it. Is that right, Alex?
Yes, very good.
Jerry?
Yeah, this question is equally directed to our two speakers and anybody in our meeting. It seems like one quality that underlies both of the talks, and it seems central to the whole spiritual path idea, is the quality of calmness. This witness position, I think Vikash used the word relaxed. All of these practices seem to require calmness. And I was wondering, we have the benefit of having a whole philosophy, we've come in contact with traditions and a whole environment of ideas that supports the need for generating calmness. But is there some central common practice that a human being, whether they know about Theosophy or Buddhism or mindfulness, that they can use to increase their level of calmness? How do we develop more calmness?
If I may share some thoughts, Jerry. See, one of the idea which comes to the mind is that it's based on understanding of the real nature of life to some extent. And it's based on the wisdom which is generated by contemplation of this knowledge, which means that the moment if you see how temporary everything is, how conditioned existence exists, how everything is based on the skandhas and the aggregates, and there is no intrinsic reality, then the question arises that what is my reality? Who am I? And on these lines, if you further proceed, one will also see in all the systems or religions and everywhere in all the devotional books, it's very clearly mentioned that kill desire, because desire itself is arising based on the fundamental avidya or ignorance that I am I, or I am this body and this personality is me. But the moment you realize that you are not this body or you are not this personality and none of us are, and there is not me and you, and there is not my Atma or your Atma, there is only one Atma. And when your desires and attachment is dissipated by the sword of knowledge, then what happens is you have no fear and you have nothing to worry about and you have no desires to run after, and automatically calmness comes in.
I know Russ had his hand up. I just want to, Eva, you raised your hand. Did you raise your hand in connection with Jerry's question about calmness?
Well, let Russ go first, please.
All right. Russ, please. You're muted, Russ.
Yeah, actually, this is Ray.
Oh, okay. I was confused about that.
I had to use Russ's connection because mine failed. So,
well, since there was only one Atman, and I figured you're all the same, so I didn't make a fuss of it.
All right. So, first of all, I'd just like to thank both the presenters because they complemented one another in a most remarkable way. And so my question is picked up, it happens to be from the diagram of Alex, but it relates intimately to what Vikash was speaking of. So if I could just get a brief comment from both of you on this, it would be helpful. The Eightfold Noble Path diagram that we were given showed the three divisions of wisdom, conduct, and discipline, and their connections. If both of you could give a brief comment about dhyana and the rules of observing that practice, as Alex spoke of the rules overseeing Shila, and I would assume that if I could have listened carefully enough, the same would apply to prajna. So applying the, and Vikash spoke of balances. And so would each of you comment about, I'm going to call it the rules of our own self-observation, which bring the high-level abstraction of the meditative process, contemplation of dhyana, down to the level of the more physical, emotional, and I'm going to say mindful levels of our activity and daily consciousness, instead of it being of quite a high abstraction.
Alex, do you want to go first?
Sure. So why meditate? You know, why do we meditate? And one idea is, if you look at the mind, there are three aspects of the mind that are very important. Is the space of the mind, then you have the mind per se, and then you have the energy of the mind, what is called the five vayus, the five prana winds. So the five winds are like a blind horse on which the mind is the rider. So the winds, when they're a horse that is like wild, and the rider has no capacity of holding the reins, the horse is going to take the rider all over the place. And that's why, you know, scatter mind and this and that. So the idea of meditation is exactly that aspect of calming, what was said earlier, calming the horse. You're calming the five vayus, the five pranas, the five winds. And by calming that, then the mind now can hold the reins, and then you can start, you know, the process of introspection and the process of investigation, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But as long as the mind is subject to the five winds, and the five winds are completely indisciplined, when you start meditating, you bring a mind that is uptight, rigid, anxious. It is very hard to meditate. Or you have a mind that just has so many thoughts that you can't stop thinking. The thoughts, the energy of the thoughts, you know, just where does the energy come from? And those are these five winds that work with the mind in tandem. So that's why meditation is so important, because you bring the horse of the mind back into, let's say, the stable. And that from there, then you start really understanding what the mind is, what is the horse, and who is the rider, you know, on the horse. And that you really go into the nature of both. At the ultimate level, the two are one. There's no difference between the primordial energy of awareness and awareness at the ultimate level. So, and that's one thing that is so important for the students to uncover.
Very helpful and graphic with the metaphor. Vikash, could you add anything or a different dimension on that?
Actually, Alex provided all the core ideas, but what all other things come to the mind is that, see, the moment we try to focus our mind on a particular thought, automatically because of our predispositions of other thoughts and the gunas which we have, the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, the associated energies of the previous skandhas and the elementals come into activity immediately. And also what's happening is that we have to consciously always put an effort to bring our mind to the focus or the point on which we are meditating or trying to comprehend or contemplate. Because the first step is dhyana, then you reach a stage of dharana, and then you reach a state of samadhi. At the stage of samadhi, you become one with the object. So there is nothing like subject and object. But this path throughout, you are continuously working using the iron will, like what Damodar has mentioned in the article of contemplation, wherein you are not providing any split second or micro split second for your mind to wander away. And you are bringing it back again and again consciously. Initially, it will be very difficult. Then the gap of being on the right track and then wandering will reduce. But that iron will needs to be there. But the most important ingredient, what Mr. Wadia has also mentioned, is that spiritual will, which is a different thing from our ordinary will, wherein one has completely realized to a great degree that they are really not this instrument or body, and they have offered themselves to the higher self completely, which is in Sanskrit known as Ishvara Paridhana, wherein you have completely offered yourself to the higher self. In different terms, if we were to say that it's your will, that is the will of the higher self, that will be done and not mine. So when you have reached that intense state, then only you can consciously work with the iron will and work towards dhyana, dharana, and samadhi in a very effective and practical manner. So those are the few thoughts which come in addition to what Alex beautifully mentioned.
Thank you, Vikash. As timekeeper, I need to look at the time here and give folks who have graciously attended today the opportunity to escape if you need to go on to other things. And we have some momentum here, and I think anyone who is willing to, please remain on, and we'll continue the discussion, especially get to the folks who have raised their hand. I just want to remind you that next week, April 29th, the themes for the two talks will be The Search for Truth and Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and I sure hope you can make it. Eva?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Vikash and Alex, for two very inspiring talks, very clear, very profound. And we all know the seriousness of all the challenges on the path and how the mind is unruly. But I was just wondering if you could say something about the aspect of humor in this, the importance of having humor coming into this spiritual path.
Yes, actually, it's a very practical and very important thing, the aspect of humor, because if we are taking ourselves very seriously, then we are associating ourselves with this personality. So when we are failing or when we are succeeding or whatever situations we are going through, if we are taking ourselves very seriously, then we are stuck in this deluded loop of associating ourselves with this personality and separating us from the whole. But if we look to our situations of life and everything from apart, unattached, like from the witness consciousness level or the silent spectator level, as we say it poetically, then what happens is we are not getting attached to the situations, failures, successes, or whatever ups and downs or vrittis of the mind or situations. And then we can laugh at it from a distance. We can have that stand wherein we are not even, we are in our mental energies and psychic energies and spiritual energies are not under a lot of weight and pressure, because that's where we often slip and fall down. The moment we associate ourselves with this situation, with these emotions, with these thoughts, and with this vehicle and the body, that's one thought comes to the mind.
Alex, do you wish to respond to that? Maybe with a joke?
That was a good one. Yeah, no, it's very well. I mean, Vikash already brought everything up. In the presentation, we talked about the pyramid of meditation, and the basis was relaxation. Usually humor comes up from also being relaxed, spontaneously arising. You know, because if I'm the mudra, you know, mudra of grasping is the fist, but the mudra of relaxation is the open hand. So when that open hand allows for possibilities to occur, and one of the possibility is absolutely humor, the capacity, which is connected with instant presence. The prajna reveals instant presence. That instant presence is connected with the capacity of looking at lila, you know, the play of the gods, and that humor then arises spontaneously from within. But it's a humor that is not sarcastic. You know, sarcastic from the Greek comes from, you know, tearing the flesh. So it's not about tearing the flesh. It's about a real inner healing, you know, that humor brings up through instant presence that is unveiled. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Monica. You're up next.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. Both, I truly appreciate. My question is regarding the pyramid of meditation. And I have here the basis. It says relaxation, yet alert, vividness, and Sheila. And so my question is about vividness. I'm wondering if this is referring to images that the meditator chooses or takes upon one's own self, or images that appear as a result of this fundamental state of relaxation. And also in reading a little bit about Tibetan Buddhism, this vividness seemed to be related to non-discursiveness. So I have a bit of a confusion about this idea of vividness. Is it the intensity of a specific image, or just a state of consciousness, or what? Thank you. Forgive me for rambling.
Alex?
Yeah, no, excellent question. Maybe I should have been a little more clear. Yes, vividness is the quality of your own awareness. So, okay, what are the two aspects of our awareness? If you look at our awareness, right? I'm aware of being aware right now, but also I'm aware of people around me. So one of the aspects of awareness is luminosity, which comes with that idea of vividness, that intensity. And the other aspect is cognizance. So these are the two qualities of awareness, luminosity and cognizance. And everybody can see that because we're all cognizant, but also luminosity. Luminosity does not mean like light as we understanding, is the capacity of revealing, is something that reveals something that before was not seen. So the vividness comes from the aspect of luminosity of our consciousness. So the more we're able to maintain attention, and the more we're able to sustain the relaxation with the stability, then the vividness arises. Eventually, as we get better in meditation, we enter into what is called the substrate of our consciousness, the substrate consciousness. And then we uncover these three aspects, which are luminosity, non-conceptuality, and bliss. This internal bliss, which we're not blissing out. It's a profound well-being that now arises spontaneously because of the healing that has occurred within the mind. So when we're talking about vividness, we're not talking so much about images being very, very clear, which that is part of it. You know, that's a byproduct. But we're talking about what already exists in our awareness and now is unveiled. And now you have like a very sharp, high definition. It would be a high definition way of perceiving reality. But the beauty about this process of meditation is that you use everything that you came in incarnation with. You don't bring anything from outside, in a sense. It's all something that we already have it. The luminosity, we already have it. The cognizance is already there. The vividness is there. The bliss is there. And the non-conceptuality is already there, but they're covered up. So it's the process of unveiling these aspects of our nature. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Oh, that's tremendous help. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Vikash, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. So, yeah, actually, like Alex mentioned, see, deep down, we are all that diamond soul itself. We are Buddha itself. It's the delusion, it's the skandhas, it's the purification which is required for all the sheets of the 49 fires, which will finally lead us to consciously realize our true nature. So that's the whole process. And for that, first we need to be conscious and then we need to work over it. And from there, the entire cycle starts wherein we are putting in effort and then we are working on dhyana and then reaching the state of dharana and then ultimately samadhi. So I think those are the high level ideas, but most of it Alex has covered here.
Thank you so very much.
I also appreciated, Vikash, in your presentation, your discussion of those different kinds of meditation, just, the importance of when you're walking, to be aware of your walking, when you're eating. And I love that description you gave about that we're making offerings to the body and to the lives in that, because we can easily see that other part of the personality taking over, thinking it's taking something, the greed, the appetite, all of that. So all of these minute observation can be an antidote to so much that plagues us. I got that from both of you very much. Well, we probably should wrap this up. And what a wonderful meeting. I loved the technical discussion on both of your parts. It was a very profound meeting, and yet you seem to both really connect the practical, mindful, ethical aspects with the metaphysical underpinnings, and it was really the fruit of longtime students. So thank you very much. Barry, do you have anything you need to?
No, just to thank everyone for attending and for your moderating too. And thank you, everybody. And we'll get together next week.
Wonderful. Have a wonderful week.
Namaste. Everybody be well. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
everyone.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Merci, au revoir.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Beautiful.
Alex.
We're going to see who holds out the longest.
Jerry, how do I get that recording? I came in late. I want, this is a jewel. I need this recording. How can I get access to it?
I have to put it together over the weekend, and I promise you I'll get right onto it, and it'll be posted on the websites that the various websites that house such things. But I will send out a notice too.
Fantastic. That was incredible.
Yeah. All the best, everybody.